I'm going to, I don't need to read about Dr. Radha Karmi. I know her well. She was born in Jerusalem. She's a writer, a journalist, author, academic. She's also a fellow and a lecturer at the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies at Exeter University. I've known her for many years. A lot of people would have seen her on TV discussing Palestinian issues, but her speciality is Arab and Islamic studies. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Lord Ahmed, for that kind introduction. And good evening, everybody. So
Sorry,
it's not
I will try and
for you to hear me. All right. Well, I thank the organizers for organizing this really very important event, I think, because, of course, what we need to be clear that the issues here are, first of all, the niqab as an extension of the hijab. So the whole idea of the veiling of women, whether it's just the hair or whether it's the rest of the body or the face, they are all part of the same issue. Secondly, this is a political issue. We must be quite clear. Religion plays, in my opinion, a very tiny part in this matter. It has become political for a lot of very interesting and significant reasons. It's not an accident. But let me just first of all deal a little bit with the theological or doctrinal issue, which of course our first speaker had dealt with so very well indeed. The whole issue of the veiling of women hinges on the interpretation of three areas, three verses in the Quran. We must be clear that the Quran is itself not specific on this issue. It does not say, for example, women shall cover their hair and their arms to the wrist and their legs to the ankle. It doesn't do that. It's important to realize that. What it does do is to say women, and I have the verses here, and it's important to realize that this is it's very much a question of allusion interpretation. So it says here, say to the believing women that they should not display their beauty and ornaments except what ordinarily appear thereof. Secondly, that they should draw their veils over their bosoms and not display their beauty except to their husbands, etc., etc. So that's the first two allusions. And then the second allusion is to the question of the wives of the Prophet. Tell thy wives and daughters, O Prophet, and the believing women, that they should cast their outer garments over their persons when outside, when abroad, that is most convenient for them, etc. And then finally, there is the verse which is that when people come to visit the Prophet, and when you ask his ladies for anything, his wives, his harem, ask them from before a screen that makes for greater purity of your hearts and for theirs.
The technical in his way, on his way.
Right. Now that last, let me just dispose of the last illusion. The only reason I brought that up is because that's actually quite clear. A screen means a screen, hijab, actually it's a screen. But I have heard people who defend the niqab on the grounds that verse in the Quran refers to a barrier, screen, but not as a kind of a screen in a room, but as a screen worn on the body of the woman. Right. Now, you see from those verses that this way of putting things in the Quran is really not very clear. What does their beauty mean? What constitutes their beauty? Does it include their face? Does it include their hair? What about their neck? Isn't that beautiful or not beautiful? Secondly, what about old ladies who are really are not beautiful? Does it matter if they have no beauty, there's no beauty that they should be covered? I'm drawing this out to show you that this is this is unclear. Secondly, the question of throwing their veils over their bosoms. What's their bosom? What is it? Is it really the breast area? Is it more than that? What is it exactly? And to cover the idea of drawing a veil, is the hair really an ornament? Who said it was an ornament? Is it or is it not? You see, the problem here is it one of interpretation. Now, the verse on the wives of the Prophet and the wives of the believers should draw their jilbab, their outer garment. Yes, of course, many people will say that was to do with an important social custom at the time that the women close to the Prophet, and indeed the women of a certain class, should not be stared at by the vulgar, and therefore they have to cover themselves. There's nothing here in which we can definitively assume that it refers to all women. The point I'm trying to make here is that this really is a question of interpretation, and we must always bear that in mind. Now, having said all that, there is nothing in the Quran, repeat, nothing, which refers to the covering of the face, of the niqab. And I'm very inclined to say that the question of modesty is enjoined on both sexes. It's usually invoked in the case of women, but actually it's obligatory for both sexes. We don't hear much about men's legs or men's arms as in the question of modesty, but I think this is not right. Now, in reality, the niqab, briefly let me just say, Lord Ahmed, I'm aware of the time, but the niqab, this covering of the face is very much to do with local customs. You will get this in certain tribal areas in the Arabian Peninsula. I can tell you that in the United Arab Emirates, if you visit there, there is a leather version of this, which comes across the face. This is a local thing. And not only is it a local thing, it is a tribal in various areas, the Burqa in Afghanistan, there are these local variations. But secondly,
he's trying to switch it on. It's off. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. But secondly, it's also a historical thing. My own mother, living in the first part of the 20th century, used to cover her face. And women covered their faces, by the way, in Syria, in Palestine, in Egypt. This was a custom of the time, which they then discarded. So we need to be quite clear that this is a custom, it is not a part of Islam. However, I'm now going to come back to what I'm saying is the real issue about all this. This hijab, this veiling of women, is really a political statement, and it's a statement about identity. It's saying to the non-Islamic world, and indeed to the Islamic world, when their governments, those governments in many Islamic states are seen to be corrupt or pro-Western, it's saying, we are Muslims, we are proud of that, and we want to show you that we are Muslims in a very obvious way. On this part of the world, this has become a really big issue. There is a wave of increasing external religiosity, because I really don't know what goes on in people's hearts. I have no idea whether they are good Muslims, good people inside themselves. I don't know. All I know is that externally there is a wave of almost a fashion to show, to make clear that we are Muslims. And this is, of course, in reaction to various important events that have happened in our lifetimes, which we can understand. The most important of them has been, in my opinion, the Western treatment of the Islamic world. The fact that for so long Western governments have given themselves the right to invade, to occupy, to colonize, and to pillage and steal from Islamic communities, societies all over the Islamic world. This has had a reaction. And part of that reaction, in my view, is this sudden pride in being Muslim, this declaration of saying, I am a Muslim. It reminds me of rather the black, black is beautiful movements earlier towards the end of the 20th century, where black people who were also oppressed said, no, we're going to stand up and we're going to show that we're black and beautiful. It's something like that. And I think it must be understood in that way. If it is not, we take the risk of responding inappropriately, which is what's happened in France, which fortunately has not happened in this country, and I hope doesn't, which is to make this a matter of law and to outlaw it and to say that you can and cannot do that. Outside the confines, the limits of what is sensible, clearly, you cannot have a passport if somebody is covered from head to foot. You cannot really teach small children looking like a black ghost. Yeah, there are various areas where really it's not appropriate. But if you exclude those, it is not right to make this illegal and to make it punishable. What it will do is precisely the opposite. It will provoke the reaction because it's a political reaction, it's nothing to do with religion, and will make the whole thing much, much worse and may lead even to riots. So finally, Lord Ahmed, and I apologize, I would say, please, everybody, people need to be clear about this. I'm very worried about this kind of soup blancmange that's going on with Islam and hijabs and headscarves and Muslims. And this has become a big mess. There is something called Islam which is adopted and practiced by many people. I'm one of them. I'm not wearing anything on my head, and I don't think I'm anything less of a Muslim for that. There is something called Islam, and there is something called politics, political statements, identity politics, anxieties, insecurities. They are a different issue. They're expressing themselves in this visible form, but that's what they are.
Dr. Ghadir Karmi, thank you very much. We will come back. Perhaps men don't have very nice legs and arms. We'll talk about that later on. Whether they do. Okay.